So we're living in a time right now of budget cuts, of economic headwinds, where organizations are struggling to make ends meet. And this raises the question, how can we still provide exceptional service with less economic means? I think the idea of doing more with less can easily be misunderstood and also abused, I think, in many organizations. And I've seen this when I taught executives of larger firms, and I told them, you don't need to give your employees more resources and they need to accomplish more. Their lights shine up and they're like, excellent, brilliant. This is exactly what we need. But what they misunderstand is that you have to create the environment in which this is effective. And this happens when you have this culture of support, a culture of experimentation. But if you use it just as an excuse to cut costs without providing the support mechanisms, then the organization is going to burn out. Employees will be frustrated. You're not going to be able to accomplish the entrepreneurial goals, aspirations that you set out to revitalize with these initiatives. To answer the question, I'd like to walk through what I see as the normal progression of an organization from the startup to maturity, and try to understand what happens with an organization as they grow, and how do they lose maybe some of the entrepreneurial spirit in the early times, and how can we bring it back. The example that I would like to give comes from a Chinese setting, building on the trajectory of the Huazhu Group. This is a chain of hotels in China. And in the early years, there was a very strong founder personality who had a very strong impact on the culture of the organization and on identification of employees with the company. As the chain of hotels became larger and larger, a lot of this got lost, because not everybody could know the founder any longer. And suddenly the question was, how can we manage our employees? And what the hotel then did, they added a lot of process controls, meaning every individual knew that these are the KPIs that I have to accomplish to be evaluated positively. So if we take the example of an employee working at a reception, they knew that they would be evaluated by customer feedback, specifically on their customer service. But what happens in the process of that is that employees care less and less about the performance of the hotel group as a whole, and they focus more and more just on their isolated individual piece of work. You can also start to manipulate and game the system. So if you work in reception at a hotel, what do? Free upgrades for everyone who comes in through your doors. Of course, customers love it, but it's not really good for the hotel. So the question then for the hotel was, how can we bring back some of that entrepreneurial mindset? And what the hotel group did was they emphasized goals that extended beyond the direct sphere of influence of the employees. So what this meant is that hotel managers were not only responsible for the performance of their own hotel, but for the performance of a cluster of hotels that they were a part of. And the idea was that you had to come up with ingenious ways of how to solve problems that extended beyond your direct sphere of influence. And I think this is also a method that we can use as we are thinking about doing more with less. When we're dealing with economic scarcity, employees need to find ingenious ways of solving problems and oftentimes bringing back the mindset of an entrepreneur. We accomplish this by having a culture in which individuals experience the positive experience of closing that entrepreneurial gap. We need a culture of experimentation and growth where employees know that we can take risks to close that entrepreneurial gap through our actions and not be penalized if our first attempts to do so fail. To create a culture of support, I think what organizations need to do is to give employees the experience that investments in their peers, in their subordinates, in the culture of an organization is valued and rewarded. And if employees experience that, then it becomes contagious. And leaders and their behaviors go a long way in demonstrating those behaviors.